Hey friends, Shug here with Women's Hot Topics. Oh, we have got a hot topic today that is really close to my heart. You all know I've had a challenging year of health issues. My husband and I looked at death in the face, and we have come through the fire on the other side. And I just praise God for His grace for that. But you know what it really did? It really prepared us to look at death, to look at what's going to happen in our lives. I mean, a quote that's on our author's webpage goes like this: We are prepared to live, but are we prepared to die? And I have a wonderful guest here with us today. And if you're from Minnesota, you will know who she is. She is Pat Miles. Yep, Pat Miles, the infamous Pat Miles. She was an anchor on TV as well as a radio show. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But I am honored to have her come on. You know, what she has done is she has composed a book by combining real life experiences with practical information from experts. Pat Miles and Suzanne Watson have created an honest, inspiring guide to do what? To prepare you and I, to prepare women and couples, so get your men in here to listen to this, for an emotional, practical, and financial impact of losing a spouse or partner. Now, y'all, don't turn it off. Listen in. You're like, no, I'm too young for that. That's not going to happen. I want you to know that the average age of a widow, friends, is 55 for women. And so that's way too young. And so we need to prepare. We need to know there's a lot of widows that are younger, that have little kids. There are widows that are older. But I think, why not be savvy? Why not take this wisdom under our belt and start to make preparations? We prepare for our life savings, our future, our retirement. Why aren't we preparing for when we pass? Because hallelujah, when I go, I'm going to be with Jesus. And so I want to make sure that each and every one of you aren't surprised by what is going to happen. Now, again, I'm honored to have Pat Miles Zimmerman as our guest today. She was a revered part of the Twin Cities media landscape for more than a quarter of a century, a former TV news anchor for WCCO and KARE 11. She was also a creator and host of a Pat Miles special, which I watched, I swear, every one of them, for KARE TV, and rounded out her career as a host of the Pat Miles Show on WCCO Radio. A role model for women, all of us in industry. Pat has won numerous accolades. We couldn't even list them all. She's got so many, including the National Television Academy Silver Circle Award and induction into the Minnesota Broadcast Hall of Fame. Welcome, Pat, and we're so glad that you came on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to come on the show. I really appreciate any opportunity I get at this point to tell people about this book and why I wrote it and why I think it's important.
Well, you already led into my first question. Why did you find, and I'm going to hold this up, you all need to see this. It's called Before All Is Said and Done. And why did you decide to write this book? And what does the title mean anyways?
Well, so my husband, who was an attorney, very successful attorney, died very suddenly of pancreatic cancer. It was something that, he was preparing for my death. We used to laugh about it because he was the most healthy person I knew. He didn't drink. He exercised every day. He was, 72, and he had a 36-inch waist. He did a 4-minute plank. He was just the epitome of health. And so we always used to laugh about the fact that I was the one that was going to go first because I had no longevity in my family. Everybody in my family died very young. And he was like, you don't watch what you eat. You drink wine. And so, he was preparing for my sickness and illness and death, and in a joking way, because we both actually never thought that would happen to either one of us, which I think most people in this culture think that we're going to live forever, or we're going to die at the age of 105 in bed next to the person we love in our sleep. Well, God bless if that happens, but the likelihood of that happening is pretty slim to nothing. So anyway, when Bucky got sick, and really, when you Google pancreatic cancer, it says you have about 3 months, which is exactly what he had, 3 months. We always thought we were going to be the exception to the rule. So we didn't really we didn't really talk about him dying. We didn't really plan for that. We worked a lot on kind of like what are treatments and where do we go and who do we talk to. And I really thought, and I think he did too, that we were prepared. I say in my book, we were set for life. What we didn't know is that we were not set for death. And so after he died, I found myself just in a puddle of problems and really big problems, huge problems and decisions that had to be made. And I was in no shape to do any of it. I was in a complete, what I call the grim fog of grief. I couldn't believe what had happened in my life, what had happened to me. I didn't accept it. I was like, I kept thinking, I'm still going to wake up tomorrow and this is going to be back to normal. And so I was doing all of this stuff and I wasn't doing it very well. And I made a large number of mistakes that cost me dearly. Mm. And at the end of about a year, I thought to myself, I'm a pretty smart person, and Bucky was a pretty smart person. And if this happened to me and to us, there got to be other people out there that are going through this same kind of crisis of not dealing with the inevitability of death. And so I thought, I'm going to start talking to people who have been through losing a spouse or a partner, loved one, and find out what happened to them. And it was during COVID, so I got lucky because people were home and answering the phone. And even people who didn't know me, I was finding on the internet or finding in articles, and I was calling them just out of the clear blue saying, hey, you don't know me, but I'm a journalist, and will you talk to me? I'm trying to write this book and I want to know what happened to you. And I would say 99.9% of these people all talked to me and told me their stories. And I think out of about 200 people I talked to, I don't think there was one that didn't run into some terrible issue or problem that they hadn't prepared for, dealt with, or anticipated.
Wow.
Yeah. And you can't believe the stories I've heard since I wrote the book, because people who read it then want to tell me their story. And I just ran into a woman the other night. I sat next to her at a dinner party, and she said, Pat, I read your book, and she said, I want to tell you what happened to me. Now, I get this all the time, right? People want to tell me, and I'm kind of like, oh, another story, right? But this one really, boy, I wish I'd met her before I wrote the book, because I would have put this story in the book. She was married to an extremely successful man, let's say, and he wasn't, but let's say he was the president, CEO of Exxon, one of the big major companies in the country. And they had homes all over. They had a home here in Scottsdale. They had a home in Aspen. They had a home in New York City, and all that comes with that kind of great success in business. And he got extremely ill and fell into a coma at the age of about 78. They were older couple and, enjoying retirement and the beautiful life, right? What she didn't know is that his two sons were the trustees of his estate. And when he fell into a coma, his two sons came to the house in Arizona and said to her, we are putting everything in our names. You are allowed to live in the house until Dad passes, but then you're on your own.
Wow.
No car, no retirement.
Was this their mother?
Stepmother.
Stepmother.
This happens a lot in step marriages.
Mm.
She had no idea that the two sons, his two sons by a previous marriage, and they had been married 30 years, so it was a marriage from a long time ago, obviously, but she had no idea that the two sons were the trustees. They'd never talked about it. She wasn't involved in his business. Most women aren't, or don't really pay attention or don't know. And so she sat for a week and a half by her husband in the coma, wondering what was going to happen. She said, I saw myself living in my car. She said, I had no place to go. I had no money. I had, my clothes and my jewelry. But, well, as it turned out, and maybe it was a divine intervention, but he woke up. And she told him what had happened. He called his attorney. The attorney came to the home. They worked it out so that she was going to get at least one of the homes and one of the cars and some kind of a financial settlement. And 2 days later, he passed away. So she got very lucky.
Oh, yes.
So many people out there that don't. And if you do not prepare for the inevitability of death, if you do not know what's going on, you most likely will end up with a lot of problems. And unfortunately, it happens to a lot of older women more than anybody else. I mean, I was one of those people. You know, I used to go to the estate planning meetings with Bucky, and I wouldn't pay any attention at all. I was looking at my watch, like, how much longer till I can get out here and go have lunch or go shopping or play golf or do something other than listen to this? Because I don't need to know about this. He's an attorney. He handles the finances. I don't need to know all this.
I can see why you would think that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so when he died, I didn't know anything. And not only did I not know anything, but I didn't have my own advisors. I call it in my book, Trusted Advisors. Make sure you have your own trusted advisors. Mm-hmm. Because once Bucky died, the relationships with those people were his relationships, and they died with him. Mm-hmm. They didn't care about me. I didn't have my own people. They cared, and this, I'm sorry to say, I think I quote the Bible in the book, for the love of money, you know, is the root of all evil. Mm-hmm. When someone dies, you're going to find out that what most people care about and are in business for is making money. And they're going to make a lot of money when someone dies, especially if someone's been successful. So anyway, that's a long version of why I wrote the book, but I got really mad. I got so angry that I was so stupid and that I made so many mistakes. And I thought, man, if I can help somebody avoid this, then I have an obligation to do it. And I'm not trying to be, you know, Pollyanna about this. I just thought it was an important thing to do.
It is. It's going to help so many of you listeners out there. And you know what I really appreciate is in the book, she researches, she talks to experts, she talks to people in the field. You talk about finding your own financial advisor, your own trustee, who to appoint, you know, et cetera, things like that. And the title, Before All Is Said and Done, do it now before you need to know it. Don't make these decisions on this important paperwork and documents while someone is dying. It's more important to do it while you're both healthy. And you mentioned that in your book as well.
Well, if you wait until somebody is sick and dying, you've waited too long. It's not going to happen. Bucky and I weren't talking about what's your account number, what's your password, what's the code to get into it. We weren't talking about any of that. Mm-hmm. In fact, we were in denial that that was happening. Yeah. And so I tell families and couples, you know, do this while times are happy, while days are good. Yeah. Do it while everybody is well and thinking straight. That's especially true if somebody should fall into dementia or Alzheimer's. I mean, do all of this while you are in good health and of sane mind, and you can make right decisions and plan. Because if you don't do it, you're going to leave behind, for the people you love the most, a trail of tears. Trust me. And it's not an easy trail to walk.
And, you know, you bring up so many wonderful scenarios from the people you interviewed, what they came across. I mean, it's just sage advice from experts and stories from surviving spouses that will provide a plan of action. And I know that you guys might plan your car. You probably spend more time figuring out what new car you're going to buy. I think it's really important that you plan out your death, because you know what, 100%, we're all going to go, people. I know I hate to be the one of bringing bad tidings here, but it's important that we keep track of that. And, you know, you explain the difference in the book, and I'm going to get into a couple of little minute details that I thought were really fascinating, if I could. You explain the differences between grief and depression. Why is it important to understand the two?
Well, I think it's really important to understand the two, because grief is its own beast. One of my good friends, who's in the book, most people, and she doesn't mind because she has gone to some speaking engagements with me, and she's more than happy to tell her stories. And you might remember, if you were a TV watcher back in Minneapolis, Nancy Nelson and Bill Carlson.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and Nancy, after Bill passed away, I didn't recognize her. I mean, I didn't know who she was anymore. She fell into such grief over his death that she literally wasn't functioning. I mean, she literally wasn't. And she is a dynamo. I mean, you talk about a dynamic personality. Nancy is one and still is. And today, you know, she's the greeter at the Chanhassen Dinner Theater. And one of
I didn't know that. I should go.
yes, yes, and one of them, and also stars with Don Shelby and Love Letters there. So she's dynamic, but she talked me through this process of grief, and you know, people who don't know what they're talking about will say, "Oh, well, it gets better with time." No, it doesn't get better with time. Grief does not go away. Grief is something that you are going to live with for the rest of your life. When you lose somebody you love, you're going to live with grief. And it changes, I think, but it doesn't go away. It becomes a part of who you are. Depression, which can go along with losing someone, is something that can be treated, is something that can be, you know, clinically dealt with. And I think it's important that you seek professional help for both of these, you know, conditions, and they really are conditions. A lot of people go to grief therapy groups and they find enormous benefit from that. I didn't do that. I wonder now if maybe I should have. I think I dealt with a lot of my grief and depression on my own because I'm kind of a private person. But I think it's important that you recognize these things and figure it out and get professional help for really both things, because it you know, there are a lot of people that never get over it. They don't. They get stuck in their grief and they don't move forward. And 15 years after they've lost their husband and you bring it up, they burst into tears. They get stuck. And it, you know, for a lot of people, it's where they live the rest of their lives. And so it's a condition that was very real and has to be, you know, addressed, faced.
I appreciate that you addressed one of the chapters on getting, you know, are you stuck? How to get unstuck? Right. Toward the end of the book, that was really good wisdom. You know, from your research and then your own experience, you had a quote that I really appreciated, and it said, if you are in deep grief, it is just a response to the love that you had for that person. And a woman, one of the researchers, Anne, believes that the way to deal with grief is to surrender sooner. And you said you wished you had surrendered sooner. How did you feel about that?
Because, you know, I think I was one of those people that for a long time, I just couldn't believe that my life had changed so much. I couldn't accept it. I couldn't deal with it. It was like overnight, everything that I loved and cared about and did, it just went away. It just disappeared. And I just couldn't accept it. I was just like, this can't be, this can't be, this can't be. But it is. And so you have to surrender sooner, because the more you fight that, the more you don't face that, the more you don't deal with that, the more difficult life is. So that's what surrender sooner means.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, anyway. For me, it probably means something different for a lot of different people, but I thought that was a very wise thing that woman said.
It is. And, you know, friends, you might be saying, oh, I have a lot of friends, they'll support me. But I even experienced in my own medical crisis this year, the ones that you think are your friends might not necessarily be the ones. They can't deal with it. They shut down. And then other people step forward that I didn't expect, who were just rallying right next to us through this whole thing. And it's sad that happens. You had mentioned that during illnesses, when the outcome is clear, some good friends did not take time to visit. Those who did never returned. And then you found that those I didn't expect rose up and were by my side.
Right, exactly right. And you don't forget those people. You know, our culture has a hard time with death. We have a hard time dealing with it. We have a hard time talking about it. We have a hard time facing it. It's a cultural problem. And as you mentioned earlier, you know, we plan for everything else in our lives. We spend thousands of dollars planning a wedding. picking out flowers. But we might not spend even 2 minutes thinking about what's going to happen if I don't come home tonight. And one of the death doulas I interviewed in the book, she said, Pat, life has got two bookends, birth and death. And one is just as important as the other. One we have to plan for just as importantly as we plan for the other. Mm-hmm. If you didn't plan for a birth, you wouldn't have a crib or diapers or formula or anything to take care of the baby. It would be a disaster. And so it can be a disaster if you don't plan for death. Mm-hmm. And I have always been a person who's been terrified of dying. Terrified. And I think Bucky was too, which I think is part of one of the reasons we didn't talk about it, didn't face it, didn't deal with it, which is really one of the things I regret the most. I really regret that. I think Bucky wanted to talk about dying and was afraid it would scare me. And I was afraid to talk about him dying because I thought he would think I was giving up. And so we didn't talk about it. We didn't have those conversations that, oh my gosh, I wish I would have had, that a death doula can help facilitate for you. But it's just so important. I mean, my daughter was one who suggested when she came to visit us and she saw what was happening, like he was dying and I'm out, grocery shopping for a man who can't eat. And she's like, Mom, have you considered getting a death doula to come in and help you? And I'm like, a death doula? What?
That was the first time I heard about it.
Yeah, I was like, this is millennial mumbo jumbo, coming from my millennial daughter. And I'm like, Kate, I don't know what you're talking about, but don't bring it up to me again. And after Bucky died, I wrote her, or I called her, and I said, I want you to write me a letter. And I want you to tell me why you suggested that I find a death doula. And she's a social worker, so she had friends who were death doulas, and she was going to suggest one for me before I told her to get out of the room. And she said basically in her letter, Mom, I saw you guys not dealing with it. And she said, I just wanted somebody who could come in and help you have those conversations, who could come in and help you find some acceptance about what was happening, who could come in and have Bucky be able to talk to someone about what he was feeling and how, I remember he said to me right before he died, where am I going? And it's the first time there was any acknowledgement that he was dying. And I thought, oh my gosh, when I looked back on it, why couldn't we have talked? Why couldn't we have, shared that? Because I'm sure it was so hard on him not being able to. And even though he wasn't alone when he died, I think he was alone with his fears and his feelings. And so you don't want that to happen.
No.
To your loved ones.
I'm just so sorry you had to experience this, but people, this is life. This is what happens. I never thought that I would be going through something like that.
Trust me, I'm not the only person who's experienced this. There are far worse things have happened to many, many people. It's just all for a lack of our inability to deal with death and to plan for it.
And to communicate. And in your book, you made it really clear. You need to communicate with your loved ones, your stepchildren, your own children, your husband. Everybody needs to understand what you want to have done upon your passing. But I'm going to touch just a minute, if I could, on the difference between men and women. And I've seen and experienced this from my friends. You had shared that men and women experience being suddenly single in different ways. What did you see with that?
Oh my gosh. It's, and especially older women, there are a lot of, I know a lot of widows here in Arizona. It's a retirement community where I live now. And, they're lonely. They're lonely. There's a bunch of widowers I know as well, 75-year-old men. And they deal with death so differently. But, from my experience anyway, most of them want to find somebody immediately. But they're not looking for a 75-year-old widow to hook up with. They're looking for a 60-year-old or a 50-year-old. Yeah. I had lunch last summer with a guy who lost his wife. Very successful, very attractive, very fit me. And I said to him, I'm just curious. I said, how many casseroles have you had so far? Because you are exactly the kind of guy that everybody wants to fix up, right? I said, so I'm just going to guess. So his wife has been gone for 3 years. I said, I'm going to guess that at least 300 people have tried to set you up.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, yeah, probably. I said, well, I'm going to ask you, how many people do you think have tried to set me up? He goes, oh, I bet a lot. I said, none. No, none. The people are, they're, you know, if you are a 75 to 80-year-old widow, there are not people out there looking to set you up. They're just not. They're not bringing you casseroles. I can remember when, after Bucky died and I first got back to Arizona, I called a friend of mine because I walked in the house and it was like, oh, I can't believe I'm here by myself and this is so lonely. And so I called my friend and I'm like, what are you guys doing tonight? She said, oh, we're having Phil over for dinner. You know, he lost his wife and he doesn't cook. And we just wanted to make sure he had a meal and some company.
Sure.
Oh, okay. Well, you guys have fun.
Yeah.
It doesn't occur to people,
Yes.
especially other women, I think, are still married, that same dynamic is going on for women.
Yeah. Well, and also what I've discovered in my male single friends who are widows, they can't wait to get back out there and start dating. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
and especially if there's been a long-term illness, like for years and years and years, they've already grieved. They've already been through that. And now when their loved one passes, who they love tremendously, then they're ready to move on and
They're making up for lost time.
Yeah. Women are not so much like that.
No, they're not. They're not.
No. And you said too, moving on too quickly can be a mistake. I want to share a little bit about resources. And, you know, I know some of you that are listening, you might already be a widow, or you have a friend who's a widow and you don't know how to help her. I thought that you had a great example of an organization called Soaring Spirits International. Soaring Spirits International. I want you guys to find it on soaringspirits.org. It's spelled SOARIngspirits.org. And you had mentioned when Bucky died, you didn't seek professional help, which you'd already mentioned, to handle the emotional wreckage, which I thought was a really good description that you now realize was a mistake. And the great thing, when I went on the website and researched this, they have grief groups. You can either meet in person or you can meet online. It's a 24/7 online community. And the great thing is you can talk to other people who've been there, done that, who have experienced what you're going through, and that you're not alone in it. And they have helped over 4 million people. And the access for help for a friend, let's say you're a friend and you talked about a woman being stuck, Pat. Let's say your friend is stuck and you want to encourage her and you want to help her. Access help for a friend who wants some support. You can definitely go to this website and talk to people there as well on behalf of your friend on what you can do. And so I was so glad that you brought that up.
I found some great organizations out there, and I mean, there's a group in Minnesota that a gentleman started called Wings for Widows, who helps widows with financial planning and stuff when they find themselves with a mess on their hands, and they do it for free. And it's a great order. There's a lot of organizations out there that are very, very helpful, and all of these resources are in my book, so you can look them up.
You know, really my takeaway from the book, most helpful part of it is I loved all the detailed chapters. You had awesome chapters. I mean, I couldn't put the book down. You know, granted, I was healing from my surgery. I'm like, Pete, and I would call my husband and my caregiver. He was such a good caregiver. And you know, hats off to you to be a caregiver to Bucky. It's a tough job. And so he comes in and I said, honey, have we done this? Have we done this? But the detailed chapters, the stories, and the research, you brought professionals in. But what I really liked too is at the end of every chapter, you had a bullet list of a summary of what you covered in the chapter. And I had bookmarked each summary page and sat down with my husband, Blair. We had already had our trust and our will, and we thought, we had already designated our executors, and we thought we had already been all set. But because of your research and the things that you talked about, there were some things we missed. And
Mhm.
I thought it was really excellent how you brought those summary points at the end of each chapter. And here's just an example, you guys, of what I learned. As part of your thorough research, Pat, you talked to 3 different estate attorneys to get the perspectives on how to best tackle legal aspects. And especially if you have a business involved or if you have partners as well. You said finding a trusted partner to handle your spouse's estate. Powers of attorney are extremely important documents, of course. And I loved what you said. Now, this is my own terms, basically follow the money. That's my words. But dying is a big money. Healthcare, estate administration, tax returns, funeral costs, memorials, all the things that occur when someone dies involve a lot of money. And you had talked about meeting with successor trustees. And now you talk about children. And I have just met with my sister yesterday, and we talked about this. If someone has children and you have an advance directive or a financial power of attorney, you got to get the book, you guys, so you can discover what she says about how many children. Is it 1 child? Is it 2 children? You don't want them bucking heads. And I think with the advance directive, you had mentioned that if you have more than 1 child, avoid giving each child equal authority and directive. Only 1 child with your advance directive should be named. And then you said choose a child that would make the same kind of decisions that you would. And regarding financial affairs, the opposite, 2 children. You were advised that clients have more than 1 person in the financial power of attorney document. And why is that beneficial, you ask? This co-signing will prevent 1 child from looking at another sideways. And I tell you, this happens. Did you take money out of the account? So now you've got 2 people that are accountable to each other. And you said it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time to document all your final wishes, make a list, prepay your funeral expense, set up a revocable trust to avoid probate, which is a long and arduous process, get all your passwords out there, list them for each other, and organize your financial accounts.
I've just been updating my passwords, and in fact, I went online and I bought my new password book.
Awesome.
Yeah, but one of the things I also wanted to talk to you about before we run out of time are 2
Yes.
things. One is called, and it was recommended by one of the financial experts, an intention letter. Really
Yes.
important, I think, thing to do. Now, an intention letter is not a legal document, but you write down how you want things to go so that your kids can avoid, or your siblings, or it can avoid having conflicts over exactly what you're saying. I mean, I have a friend here who hasn't spoken to her sister in 25 years because her sister took a bracelet after her mom died that she is sure her mom would want her to have. Well, if her mom had written down in her intention letter, here's what I want to happen with this jewelry, and here's who I want to have it, then there can't be an argument about it. There can't be a disagreement. There can't be any confusion. If you have a cabin in Minnesota and you have 2 boys, and after you die, one wants to sell it and one wants to keep it, and they both think they know what dad would have wanted. Well, if dad puts down what he wanted, then there's no confusion, there's no argument, and there's no fight. In fact, I have a friend who, after he read the book, he has a cabin, he wrote an intention letter. He said, if John wants to sell it, then Tom can buy it, his brother, for X amount of money, but John can never use the cabin again. And that's what he wanted for his cabin. Don Shelby, who read the book, and he's called me and he said, Pat, my intention letter is up to 500 pages.
Oh.
I said, Don, this is what you call controlling from the grave. But he thinks it is so important that he writes down what he wants
Wow.
to happen after he passes. And not so much legal things, but just personal things. Like I know what my 2 girls are going to fight about. And so I've written about that in my intention letter. And if they start fighting about that, here's how I want it to be resolved. Now, they may just say, well, we're going to ignore what mom wanted, but at least they know. The other thing that I think is really important is if you have stepchildren. So many times with women I talk to during the course of writing this book, there's a chapter called Dad Never Told Us. So many times the husband with the second wife doesn't talk to his kids by the birth mom about what he's going to do and why he's going to do it. And if he doesn't let those children know what he's doing and why he's doing it, just like that story I told you in the very beginning, then there could be a lot of disagreements, and it can break up relationships, and it does break up relationships. But dad a lot of times doesn't want to have that conversation because he doesn't want to have any conflict. He doesn't want to have any fights. And especially if somebody gets sick, especially if dad gets sick, he doesn't want to have conflict with his kids. And so a lot of times somebody will die without ever explaining to that child, here's what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it. And if the other thing is, if you have siblings that have different needs, a lot of times somebody can die and the kids will, well, dad gave John more than he gave Tom. Well, that could be true, but maybe there was a reason. Mm-hmm. And maybe if dad writes down in his intention letter, here's the reason I did that. It can take away so many family squabbles. And you can't believe the number of families who end up in court because they don't deal with this stuff.
Yeah, it divides families. It's terrible.
It ruins them. It ruins them.
Yeah. I hate to say that we're closing, but friends, before I do, I want you to know we just barely touched on all of the content in this. And a few of the chapters are, I know that one of them you talked about managing your life insurance money, which I really appreciated. What to pay off, what to keep, how to hang on to it, et cetera. So that was a really great point that you made about life insurance. And other things you talked about is managing, the quandary of stepchildren, which we touched on, saying the long goodbye, the ravages of dementia. What I learned is I didn't realize there was that many different diagnoses for dementia, and to make sure that you get the correct diagnosis for each one. When to look for a memory care facility, stung by sudden death, accidents, suicide, shock. How do you deal with those sudden deaths? You talked about COVID as well and how that played into scenarios. Surviving the ultimate sacrifice, the unique grief military widows have, why military deaths are different than everyday people's deaths. Don't drink and grieve, alcohol's role in delaying grief. And you also talked about easing the transition and the guidance into accepting death. Then you talk about just breathe. Self-care before and after loss. Don't get stuck. We talked about that in grief and how to get unstuck. And then the last chapter you talked about building a new beginning, the relief of finding meaningful focus. I don't think there's a topic you did not touch on. I thought it was excellent. It was so well written. And I really think it applies to everybody. Before all is said and done, with Pat Miles Zimmerman and also Suzanne Watson. And the book was so well written, you guys. I highly recommend it. I would not have anybody on where I wouldn't recommend you reading this. And I'm really standing behind this. I think it's really important. And if you want to get a hold of Pat, she's got a page called beforeallissaidandone.com. She's got an info site on there. You can just write there if you wanted to contact her, if you had any questions. If you have any questions for me, please go to himforher.org, HIM4her.org. We do prison ministry. You know that we need donations for that as well. And I'm so thankful that you guys come on and listen with all the myriad of podcasts out there. This is one of the important ones, and I'm so glad that you came on. Pat, do you have any final words of wisdom for us?
Well, I wish I was wiser than I was. I guess the thing that's most important, the message that's most important is plan for the inevitability of death. Plan as if you're not going to come home tonight or your husband's not going to come home. Make sure you take care of business, the business of dying. Because like I say, you don't want to leave your family and you don't want to leave your loved ones with that terrible, terrible trail of tears. It's not an easy road to walk, and it can be avoided, trust me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pat Miles Zimmerman, for coming on our show. I was honored to have you after following you all these years on TV and radio, and I just thank you so much. God bless you and everything that you're doing. Friends,
well, right back at you.
This is Shug Burry. You know I love you. Over and out.